My name is James Bernett, though most people who ever wanted something from me learned to call me Mr. Bernett first. The property cost me $387,000. 31 years of work paid for it. 31 years pulling wire through walls, crawling through attics in July heat, climbing poles in February ice, and standing in half-finished houses before dawn with coffee that tasted like rust and habit. I was a licensed electrician in Columbus, Ohio for most of my adult life. I retired when my knees stopped negotiating and my doctor stopped pretending they still might. 2 years later, I bought 5 acres of rolling land in eastern Kentucky, about 40 minutes south of Lexington. There is a white farmhouse on it, clapboard siding, wraparound porch, 3 bedrooms, built in 1924 and rebuilt twice since. There is also a barn, or rather, there was a collapsed structure that used to be a barn, until I spent 8 months and a good portion of my savings bringing it back from the dead. New roof, reinforced beams, refinished plank floors, new wiring, better lighting, solid doors. I did most of the work myself. I did not restore it for storage. I restored it because I wanted space, a real workshop, a workbench big enough to spread out a full project, room for the lathe, the scroll saw, the drill press, room to move around a piece of furniture without turning sideways like an apology. I had spent too much of my life working in spaces that were too tight, too hot, too temporary. The barn was supposed to be the opposite of that. It was supposed to be quiet. My wife died 11 years ago. Cancer. We never had children together, but she had a daughter from her first marriage, Claire, and I had known Claire since she was 9. I walked her down the aisle. Later, when her first marriage broke and she married again, I helped her second husband tile a bathroom in Cincinnati. His name was Daniel. He was the kind of man who liked the language of opportunity more than the discipline of work. Still, he was family, or near enough to be mistaken for it. I believed we understood each other. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in the barn sanding the side of a walnut table I was building for my neighbor's birthday when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Claire. We talked for a few minutes. The weather, the property, spring coming slowly to Kentucky. Then she said Daniel wanted to say hello. That should have been my first warning. Daniel got on the line and went straight to business. He told me he had been thinking about my barn. He called it beautiful. Said it had real potential. Said people were paying serious money for rustic event venues now. Weddings, corporate retreats, anniversary dinners, birthday weekends. He said there was a venue half an hour from me booking weekends at $4,000 apiece and carrying a waiting list 6 months long. I let him talk. Then I asked what any of that had to do with me. He said he wanted to partner with me. He would handle the marketing, the bookings, the setup, the communication, the event management. All I had to do was let him use the barn. In return, he would give me 20% of every booking. 20%. My barn, my land, my workshop. 8 months of restoration, and roughly $40,000 spent bringing it back. He wanted to turn it into his business and hand me a fraction of the revenue, as if I should be grateful he had thought of me at all. I told him no. Not harshly, not emotionally, just clearly. I told him I had bought the property for quiet. I told him the barn was a workshop, not a wedding venue. I told him I had no interest in spending my weekends surrounded by strangers in rented clothes, pretending my piece was a business opportunity. I said I appreciated the idea. I said it was not happening. He said he understood. We hung up. 3 weeks passed. Claire called once. Ordinary conversation. Nothing about the barn. I assumed the matter was closed. Then my neighbor drove up my lane with her phone in her hand and a look on her face I did not like. She showed me a listing on a venue rental site. Professional photographs. My barn in every frame. My farmhouse porch in the background of 2. The listing described a private, rustic venue in the Kentucky bluegrass region with restored hardwood floors, exposed beams, wraparound porch, and 5 acres of secluded land. Weekend rate starting at $3,500. Contact person, Daniel Mercer. My son-in-law. I thanked my neighbor. I told her I would handle it. Then I went inside, sat at my kitchen table, and waited an hour before making the call. Age teaches a man that the first 5 minutes of anger rarely produce his best decisions. Daniel answered on the second ring, cheerful, as if we were continuing a pleasant discussion. I told him I had seen the listing. I asked him what he thought he was doing. He said he assumed I would come around once I saw the potential. He said he had already received inquiries. He said this was good for both of us. He had even decided to increase my share to 25% because, in his words, I had seemed sensitive about the original split. I told him there was no split. I told him I had already said no. I told him he had listed my property for commercial rental without my knowledge or permission, using photographs taken during a visit I had invited him on in good faith. Then I told him to take the listing down immediately. He grew quieter. He said I was being short-sighted. He said I was sitting on a gold mine and refusing to see it. He said he had already put 20 hours into the research, branding, and listing creation, and was not going to throw that away because I was being stubborn about a barn I was not even using every day. That last sentence told me everything I needed to know. Men like Daniel always reveal themselves in the details, not just in what they want, but in how easily they redefine another man's ownership once desire enters the room. I told him the barn was mine whether I used it every day, once a month, or never again. I told him to take the listing down. He said he would think about it. I hung up. Then I called Claire. I explained what had happened and what I had seen. I told her I needed her to speak to her husband before this became something neither of them would enjoy. She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me she already knew about the listing. She said she thought it was a good idea. She said she worried about me being alone on the property and believed a business would give me purpose. She said Daniel was smart about these things and that I should trust him. I asked her whether she remembered hearing me say no 3 weeks earlier. She said she did. Then she said she assumed I might change my mind once I had time to think. I told her I loved her. I told her that had not changed. Then I told her this was no longer a difference of opinion about a business plan. Her husband had listed my land for commercial use without my consent. That was not family discussion. That was a legal problem. She said I was overreacting. She said Daniel was family. I told her family does not put your property on the market and wait for you to surrender to the idea after the fact. That evening, I sat on my porch and looked at the barn lit from inside by the shop light I had left on. I thought about the October weekend I had replaced the roof with 2 men from town, and the moment I sat on the ridge beam at sunset, tired and proud and certain I had built something worth protecting. Then I thought about Daniel, looking at the same structure and seeing only tables, deposits, and margins. The next morning, I drove into Lexington and met with an attorney. She was direct. I respected that. I showed her the listing. I told her what had happened. She asked a few questions, then laid out my options without softness. That afternoon, she sent a cease and desist letter to Daniel's house in Cincinnati. It identified the listing, described the unauthorized commercial use of my property and photographs, cited the relevant law, and demanded the listing be removed within 72 hours. It also required that any accepted bookings be canceled, any deposits refunded, and any attempt to proceed with events on my property be treated as trespassing. At her recommendation, she sent a copy to Claire as well. Then I changed the locks on the barn. I added a deadbolt to the side door, a heavier lock on the equipment shed, and 2 new security cameras, one facing the barn, one covering the yard. I set them to record continuously and send alerts to my phone after dark. I did not call either of them again that day. I had already said what needed saying. My attorney had said the rest. Daniel called that evening. His tone had changed. No warmth now, just wounded indignation. He said the letter had humiliated him. He said he had been trying to help. He said I had escalated a simple family conversation into a legal matter. I let him finish. Then I told him the legal matter began the moment he listed my property for profit without my permission, and continued the second time I told him to take it down, and he did not. I said the only thing left to decide was whether he intended to make this smaller or larger before the deadline expired. He said I owed him an apology. I told him that was not how consequence worked. The listing stayed up for 2 more days. On the morning of the 3rd, it was finally gone. I felt a small measure of relief. Not peace, just relief. 3 days later, a car I did not recognize turned into my driveway at 11 in the morning. A young couple stepped out, dressed neatly, carrying a folder. The man smiled and said they were there to see the venue. He showed me an email confirmation for a June wedding reception. 140 guests, catered dinner, live band, deposit paid, $1,000. The sender was Daniel. He had not stopped. He had moved the listing to another website under a different name and continued taking bookings while the original post was technically removed. I looked at the couple. They still believed they were speaking to a host. I told them I was the property owner, and no booking had ever been authorized by me. I told them they had been misled, and that I was sorry they had driven all that way. I gave them my attorney's name and number, and told them to keep every email and receipt they had. The woman's face collapsed first, then the man's. They left quietly. I called my attorney the moment their car reached the road. By the end of the week, she had obtained a temporary restraining order prohibiting Daniel from advertising, booking, or conducting any commercial activity involving my property. She contacted the venue platforms. She traced multiple bookings and confirmed that deposits had been taken from couples for events he had no legal authority to sell. That was the point the matter stopped being merely insulting and became something uglier. The young couple who had come to my porch were planning a wedding. They had handed money to a man who had sold them someone else's piece and called it a venue. I was angry before. After that, I was resolved. Daniel called me again 2 days after he was served. The bravado was gone. Fear had taken its place. He said he had not understood how serious this had become. He said he wanted to make it right. He said the deposits would be refunded. I told him that making it right meant refunding every dollar immediately, removing every listing on every platform under every name, and never again presenting my land as a commodity available for his imagination. Then, I told him something I wanted him to hear properly. I said the real offense was not that he had been caught. It was that he had believed he was entitled. Claire called the next day. Her voice was different, less certain. She said she had not known about the bookings. She said she thought it had only been a website. I believed her. Not because she deserved the benefit of the doubt more than Daniel did, but because I had known her too long to mistake confusion for malice. I did not tell her she had still made it easier for him by calling me stubborn when I was only being clear. Some truths are better delivered after the fire is out. The deposits were refunded within 2 weeks. The restraining order was later replaced with a formal signed agreement acknowledging my sole property rights and permanently prohibiting Daniel from any future commercial use of my land, buildings, or images. My attorney kept a copy. I kept one too. She also advised me to update my will. I did. The barn remains exactly as I intended it to be. Workshop, nothing more. In the mornings, light comes through the east windows in long flat bars across the bench. The lathe sits where I left it. Walnut dust hangs in the air. The side table got finished 2 weeks after the legal mess ended. Hand-cut dovetails, tapered legs, clean lines. My neighbor keeps it beside the window in her sitting room. I started a rocking chair last month. It is a difficult build. Curved cuts, steam-bent slats. Joints that punish impatience. I have been taking my time with it. There is no deadline, no guest list, no deposit, no man in Cincinnati calculating a percentage of what piece should cost. Claire and I still speak, carefully. That is the honest word for it. Carefully. Some injuries do not end a relationship, but they alter its posture forever. I loved her mother. I have known her since childhood. That counts for something. So does disappointment. In the evenings, I sit on the porch and look past the field toward the tree line. Sometimes deer come out at dusk. Sometimes my neighbor brings pie. Sometimes there is only the sound of insects and the long, slow settling of the day. The barn is locked. The cameras are running. The documents are signed and filed away. Inside, the rocking chair waits half-finished on the bench. Everything is exactly where it should be. That matters to me more than Daniel ever understood. Men like him look at a man my age and see a resource they believe has outlived its own purpose. They see land and silence and imagine unused potential. They think the older man must need younger ambition to tell him what his life should become. They are always surprised when they discover that peace is not emptiness. It is design. I spent 31 years building the life that paid for that porch, that barn, those 5 acres, and the quiet that sits over them at sundown. None of it is waiting to become valuable. It already is. That was the lesson Daniel never understood. The workshop was never a missed opportunity. It was the reward, and I have no intention of giving 20% of that to anyone. 3 months passed before Daniel tried to take the property from me a second time. The first attempt had been loud, too much confidence, too many listings, too much belief that other people's boundaries were only temporary inconveniences. The second attempt was quieter, which made it more dangerous. It arrived in the mail on a Thursday. I had been in the barn working on the rocker runners for the chair I had started in April when I saw the county envelope on the kitchen table. I opened it, standing up. It was a notice from the Planning and Revenue Office regarding commercial occupancy compliance, transient event taxation, and overdue documentation for a venue operating under the name Bluegrass Lantern Barn, LLC. My address. My barn. My supposed business. At first, I did not feel anger. I felt that colder thing I had felt when my neighbor first showed me the listing on her phone. The stillness that comes when betrayal stops being surprising and becomes structural. I sat down and read the notice twice. Attached to it was a copy of an application. My property had been listed as an event site. Capacity, 150. Parking plan, temporary gravel overflow on the south field. Insurance pending. Applicant authorization signed in my name. Not my signature, not even a good imitation. Daniel had not simply relisted the barn. He had laid groundwork, paperwork, filings, administrative scaffolding. He had tried to build legitimacy around the theft, which told me something I had not fully understood before. He had not been improvising. He had been moving toward ownership by paperwork. I called my attorney from the kitchen. She told me to bring everything in. An hour later, I was sitting in her office in Lexington while she read through the notice with the same expression she wore when a man handed her a problem he had already failed to contain. Focused, unimpressed, useful. "This isn't just nuisance behavior anymore," she said. I assumed as much. She tapped the application. "He's filed business paperwork tied to your land. There's also a state tax registration number on this." Which means either he expected to start collecting event taxes under a fraudulent structure, or he wanted the appearance of lawful operation for a lender or an insurer. "Can he do anything with it?" "He can cause trouble with it," she said. "That's often enough." She made 3 calls while I sat there, 1 to the county office, 1 to a state licensing contact, 1 to a banker she knew who specialized in small commercial fraud issues. Then she hung up and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "He applied for a venue-related business line of credit 6 weeks ago," she said. I said nothing. The application included revenue projections, proposed bookings, photographs of the property, and something described as an exclusive management agreement with you. I looked at her. "There is no such agreement," I said. "I know." She turned her monitor toward me. The document on the screen was 6 pages long. My name appeared on every other paragraph. It gave Daniel full management authority over event activity on my land for a term of 5 years with an option to renew. It described me as the owner, him as the operating partner, and included what was supposed to be my signature at the bottom. I had spent 31 years learning to tell whether a wall had been opened before, whether a panel had been cut by a careful man or a careless one, whether a line had been run with respect or impatience. Fraud has a similar texture. You can feel where the hand slips. That document was Daniel all over. Neat language, bad faith. "What happens now?" I asked. She folded her hands. "Now we decide whether you want to remain merely protected or whether you want him finished." There are moments when a sentence reveals more than its meaning. She was not asking whether I wanted revenge. She was asking whether I had finally understood that what Daniel had done was not family overreach or bad judgment or ambition wearing the wrong suit. It was predation, deliberate, repeated, escalating. Before I could answer, her assistant knocked and opened the door. "Your stepdaughter is here," she said. Claire stepped in, looking 10 years older than the last time I had seen her. No makeup. Hair pulled back carelessly. A leather folder in one hand. She did not sit until my attorney gestured toward the chair. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. Her voice was steady, but only just. I did not rescue her from the silence. Finally, she put the folder on the desk and opened it. Inside were printouts, emails, loan terms, draft promotional copy, a floor plan of my barn with table placements and dance floor measurements. Then, beneath all of that, a notarized draft of a durable power of attorney. My name at the top. Daniel's. My stepdaughter's husband named as my proposed agent in the event of incapacity. For a moment, the room lost all sound. I picked up the document and read it slowly. There was language about age, distance from services, property oversight, assistance with financial decisions, protection of assets, the kind of language that looks responsible to strangers and predatory to anyone who understands timing. I set it back down carefully. When? I asked. Claire stared at the desk. I found it yesterday in his home office. He said it was just contingency planning. He said if anything happened to you, someone needed authority to manage the property. That someone being him. She nodded. My attorney said nothing. She did not need to. Claire finally looked at me. I didn't know how far he'd gone. I knew about the website. I knew he wanted the venue idea. I swear to you I didn't know about the deposits, the credit application, or this. I believed her in part. Not completely. But enough. What changed? I asked. She took a breath and let it out slowly. The lender called the house. They wanted follow-up documents. He was in the shower. I answered. The man on the phone said something about the management agreement and projected revenue and the elder transition plan. I asked what he meant. Her mouth tightened. That's when I started looking. There it was. Not conscience arriving clean and early. Conscience arriving late, after paperwork had already begun to harden around the lie. Still, late truth is better than ongoing obedience. My attorney began organizing the documents into separate stacks. Mr. Bernett, she said, with this, we can pursue fraud, unauthorized use, and likely attempted financial exploitation. The question is whether you want to proceed formally, or whether you want one final controlled opportunity for him to expose himself. Claire looked at her. What does that mean? My attorney looked at me, not at her. It meant bait. It meant allowing Daniel to believe one door remained open. I sat back in the chair and thought about the barn, the morning light, the rocking chair half built on the bench, the quiet I had paid for with most of a lifetime. Then I thought about Daniel filling forms with my name on them, measuring the south field for cars that would never arrive, drafting legal authority over a life that was not his to manage. Some men understand refusal only when it costs them something they already counted as theirs. Set the meeting, I said. Claire turned toward me sharply. You want to see him? No, I said. I want him to come see what he has mistaken for weakness. My attorney arranged it for the following Tuesday. She sent Daniel a brief message from my phone, stating that, after reflection, I was willing to discuss a structured agreement if he brought all venue-related paperwork, banking materials, and operating plans in person. I hated even sending it, but lies are sometimes most useful when they invite a larger one into the room. He responded within 10 minutes, too eager, too relieved. That told me he was under pressure. Tuesday came gray and windless. I unlocked the barn myself. The space was clean. Workbench cleared except for the rocking chair frame and a folded canvas drop cloth. I set 3 chairs in the center of the room. One for me, one for Claire. One left empty until the last moment because I wanted Daniel to enter and wonder whether he had miscounted the people who mattered. He arrived just after 10. He came in carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of expression men wear when they believe they are about to convert tension into advantage. Controlled. Hopeful. a little offended that events had not already tilted in their favor. He stopped when he saw Claire. Then he saw my attorney near the side wall. Then he saw me seated by the workbench with both hands resting loosely on my knees. He tried to recover. "Jim," he said, "I'm glad we're finally doing this face to face." I had not invited him to use my first name. He used it anyway. Men like Daniel always add theft to familiarity. "Sit down," I said. He sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Wind moved lightly against the siding. Somewhere outside, a crow sounded once and then went quiet. Daniel set the portfolio on his lap and glanced toward Claire. "You could have talked to me before all this." Claire did not answer. I said, "Open the case." He hesitated, then did. Inside were brochures, revenue projections, sample contracts, a vendor list, mood boards, catering packages, parking layouts. He had built an entire business around a barn that had never belonged to him in the way he wanted. He lifted the first packet slightly. "I know things got messy," he said, "but the fundamentals are still strong. There's real demand. If we structure it properly." "Daniel," I said. He stopped. I pointed to the papers. "You brought the rope." "Good." He stared at me, not understanding yet. My attorney stepped forward and placed 3 documents on the workbench between us: the forged management agreement, the county filing, and the draft power of attorney. The room changed. Not dramatically. That is never how it happens. A room changes when a man realizes the version of events he was carrying into it has died without noise. He looked first at the management agreement, then at Claire, then at the power of attorney. His face did not collapse all at once. It failed in sections. "Claire?" "No," she said. One word, clean, final. He swallowed. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost admired the loyalty of that sentence to every cornered man who had ever lived. "It looks," I said, "like you tried to rent my peace, finance the lie, and prepare a way to manage me if paperwork alone did not work." That power of attorney was precautionary. "For what?" I asked. "My death? My confusion? Your convenience?" He stood then, too quickly. "I was trying to create something for the family." My attorney said, "Sit down." He did. "You were trying," I said, "to create authority where you had none." He looked at Claire again, searching for softness, history, escape. She gave him nothing. Then he did what weak men do when charm fails. He reached for moral language. "I was thinking long-term," he said. "You're out here alone. This place is too much for one person. I thought if we built something valuable—" I interrupted him. This place was already valuable. Silence, the kind that does not ask for permission. I stood and walked to the workbench. I laid my hand on the unfinished rocking chair frame. "You looked at this barn and saw underused square footage, weekend margins, branding, parking logistics. You looked at a life built over 31 years and imagined it was waiting for someone younger to explain its purpose to it." I turned toward him. "You were wrong." He said nothing. My attorney slid one final folder across the bench toward me. I opened it and removed 2 signed documents. The first was a deed transfer into an irrevocable trust. The second was the trust instrument itself. I placed them in front of him. "What is this?" he asked. "This," I said, "is the end of your imagination." The trust had been created the day before. The farmhouse, the barn, and the 5 acres had been transferred into the Eleanor Burnett Workshop Trust, named for my wife. The terms were simple. I retained lifetime residential and operational control. Upon my death, the property would not pass to Claire, or any spouse of Claire, or any future claimant by marriage. The land and barn would remain intact as a private workshop and small apprenticeship site administered by an independent trustee and a local vocational board. No commercial event use. No sale for venue purposes. No subdivision. No family management rights. Once I was gone, boys and girls from the county trade program would learn woodworking and electrical basics there in 12-week sessions, free of charge. Not weddings. Work, not deposits. Craft. Daniel read the first page, then the second. His face went still in a way I had not seen before. Not fear this time. Emptiness. The specific emptiness of a man watching a door disappear from the wall while he is still reaching for the handle. "You can't do this," he said, though too softly to sound convinced. I already did. Claire looked at the papers and started crying without making a sound. Not because she had lost an inheritance. She knew, the second she saw my face, that this had never been about money in the ordinary sense. It was about terms. About who had the right to define what a life's work was for. Daniel found his voice again. "So, that's it? You cut us out?" I met his eyes. "No," I said. "I cut you off." Then my attorney handed him a second packet. A repayment demand from the lender. A notice preserving civil claims. A letter documenting evidence transferred to the appropriate authorities if restitution or false filing corrections were not completed within the specified period. He looked from one page to another, then to Claire. "You'd let him do this?" Claire wiped her face once and said, "You did this." That was the line he could not cross back over. He stood without asking, shoved the papers back into the portfolio, then stopped because there was nowhere to go with them that changed anything. He looked around the barn as if seeing it properly for the first time. The lathe, the clamps, the bench scarred by real work, the unfinished chair frame. No fairy lights, no tables, no dance floor, no version of his future left in the room. Then he said something I did not expect. "You really would rather let strangers have it than family." I answered him with the only truth worth giving. Family does not take a surveyor's measure of a man's peace and call it love. He stared at me for a long second, then at Claire. She did not move toward him. That told him the rest. He left without another word. I listened to his car back down the drive. Gravel. Engine. Distance. Inside the barn, the silence settled again the way it always had. Patient. Correct. Claire stayed after he was gone. We sat for a while without speaking. Finally, she asked, "Did you decide this because of me?" "No," I said. "I decided it because I finally understood what needed protecting." She nodded, crying more openly now, and I let her. Grief is not always for what is lost. Sometimes it is for the exact moment you realize what you stood beside without stopping. "I'm sorry," she said. I looked at the morning light coming through the east windows and crossing the floorboards I had saved plank by plank. "I know," I said. She left around noon. My attorney stayed long enough to make sure the signed acknowledgments were in order and the trust copies were stored where they needed to be. Before she went, she ran her hand once along the back post of the unfinished rocking chair. "This is a better use of the place," she said. "Yes," I said. "It always was." The lender got its money back within a month. Daniel sold his boat, then a truck he had no business buying in the first place. There were formal apologies. Some of them even sounded practiced enough to fool an inattentive person. I was not inattentive. The county voided the filings. The false registrations were withdrawn. The pressure around the property finally stopped. Claire and I speak less than we once did, but more honestly. The first apprenticeship group started that autumn. 6 students. One girl from Richmond who could read a tape faster than any of them. A boy from Nicholasville with patient hands. 2 brothers who argued constantly and cut surprisingly clean joints when they stopped talking. I taught them how to square a board, how to bend conduit, how to tell whether a piece of wood was resisting because of grain or because of your own impatience. The rule in the barn is simple. Nothing gets rushed because you're excited about the result. That is true of furniture. It is also true of people. Last week I finished the rocking chair. Steam-bent slats, clean curves, honest weight. I set it on the porch facing west where the evening light holds a little longer over the field. Sometimes I sit in it at dusk. The dogwood is taller now. The cameras are still there, though I look at them less. The folder with the trust papers and legal documents stays in the desk in the house. The barn stays locked when it should. Open when I choose. The students leave sawdust on the floor and ask better questions every week. No one pays for admission. No one gets married in there. No one dances under my rafters unless they are carrying a board too long for one set of hands. Daniel wanted an event venue. What he never understood is that I did give the barn a future. I simply gave it one he could not sell. And when the fireflies come up from the grass in late summer, and the field goes gray and the workshop settles into that deep wooden quiet I spent most of my life earning, I sit in the chair I made with my own hands and look toward the barn with its lights low and its doors shut, and I think the same thing every time. He was wrong about the gold mine. I knew exactly where it was all along.